this document. Of course, you can go on Google, you can get the same document. What you're looking at right now is the life cycle of the legislation. So it's like everything in the presentation on one page. So everybody understands that every bill comes from an idea. And every idea, you have to present it to someone who is elected in order to get that idea to Leg Council, which then produces a bill. So once that happens, we as, when I say we, so I'm a committee staffer, we cannot act on bills until they are in print 30 days. Was someone saying something, or it's just feedback?
I think you're good. Okay.
So we have to wait 30 days before we can even set the bill for a public hearing. A lot of times, and what's sad on our end is a lot of times, because most of us are at work, we're never really involved in the committee process or the vetting of the bill before it goes before a larger house. So say the bill has something to do with education, okay, it's gonna be sent to the education committee. But if that bill has a financial component to it, it's going to be kind of double referred. And bills can be double referred to standing committees. And then if they have something to do with money, it'll go to appropriations. So say if it's like you have an education bill that deals with the police on campus, it will probably be referred to the education committee, the public safety committee. And because we're talking about law enforcement, that's going to have a budget component or a financial component. That's also going to be referred to the appropriations committee before it can even get before the General Assembly or the Senate House. It has to go through these committees first. That is the vetting process. If I'm going too fast, please stop me. So once you go through the vetting process, if it has to do with money, it's going to go to the appropriations. If it does not have a financial component, then it's going to go directly to the floor of origin. So if it's an assembly bill and it goes through the committees to vet it, the education committee and the public safety committee, if it does not have a financial component, it's going to go straight to the assembly floor. So our action should be talking to them while this bill is in print up to the 30 days. And once we know it's set for hearing, if we have an interest in it, we need to be making contact with the author of the office and the folks that sit on that particular committee. All this information can be found, of course, on the websites of the committees. You can find who the members are assigned to that committee, and that's where the action takes place. You have to get to those members, you have to tell them what you think, and then after you've done that, at the hearing, it's important that we show up and that we show up in numbers so that our voice is counted. So after it goes from the committees to the floor, so if it's an assembly bill, it'll go to the assembly floor, and then it goes right back through the same process in the other house. So if it started in the assembly, it's going to have to go through the Senate. That's another kind of like checks and balance of a vetting system in which they now get to look at the bill that the assembly looked at. And because a lot of times the senators are older and have been around a lot longer, it takes more to convince them than most times the assembly members who are much newer, younger, and So everybody knows that there are 80 members of the assembly, 40 members of the Senate, yes? So you have to get this idea past 120 or 119 people for it to make it out of the houses and then ultimately get to the governor's desk. If the governor likes the bill, he'll sign it. It becomes a law January 1. If he does not like it, or it's not really him, if his staff doesn't like it, he will then veto the bill, and it comes with a veto message as to why he did not approve the legislation. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure, because I'm trying to give you the cliff notes, because I do this with kids and they have a shorter kind of like attention span. So if I'm missing something, or if you have a question about something that I say, please stop me.
Hi, Lorraine. This is Tiffany. My question for you. Hey, my question is, like, how long does it take for the committees to review?
How long does it take them to review?
Yeah, like if you the example you use, if it goes to the education committee, like how long what's the turnaround before it goes to the next one? And
so it kind of depends on when it's referred to the committee. So every bill that's introduced, it goes to the rules committee first. And sorry, I left that out. And the rules committee determines what standing committee the bill is going to go to. So and they're kind of slow about referring things. So I get stuff all the way up from February to April is when they are still referring bills. And if the bills are getting amended, I could get a referral tomorrow when they have a legislative session. It really depends on when the Assembly Rules Committee sends the bill out. Once the bill has come to us, then we have to make sure that the 30 days has passed before we can set the bill. Once the bill is set, I have 24 hours. Well, I have to give 4 legislative days, I believe, for the public to be aware of the bill. And then once the bill is set and I've completed the process of file noticing the bill so that this is a public publication that goes out to tell people what's coming up on the committee's or on the next committee hearing. Once that happens, then I must have all the information, all the pertinent information, documents, background information, analyses. I must have that out to the public 24 hours before the hearing actually happens. So it's all dependent on the Rules Committee when they send it. If the bill has been in circulation for at least 30 days, and whether or not the author is ready to take up the bill, that matters too. Because if the committee staff, or I'm sorry, not the committee staff, if the author's staff doesn't get us the background information, most committees will not set the measure. So it's kind of a funky system, but once we do set the measure, I have 24 hours to get the information out after file noticing it. So if I file notice it, if I'm going to have a hearing, say, not this week, but next week, my deadline to file notice that is Thursday of this coming week. So it just really depends on when we get our hands on it. Did that answer your question? I know that was kind of like a lot. I just want to make sure I answered the question.
Yeah, somewhat, yeah, thank you.
One thing I can say about the legislature is, even though there are rules drafted, the rules rarely apply. So we kind of live in a state of limbo as to when things get set. And at any point, they can gut and amend a bill that's already in our possession and it say totally different from how it was introduced. So it's just rules don't apply even though they're written, if that makes sense. Let's see.
Lorraine, I actually have a question here too. You mentioned, did you say, was it gut and amend? Can you define that for me?
So what a gut and amend is it takes a bill that maybe people thought said one thing, and it goes in and takes the guts out of it, and it puts something else, some other language into the bill. So it could have a totally different, it could be addressing a totally different subject. And if you're not paying attention, you'll just think that it was what it was before. So they do that a lot in the last 2 weeks of session. Definitely in the last 2 days of session, you'll hear about a lot of gut and amends. You'll hear about a lot of wharfs, which is without reference to file. So every day, the legislature, or every legislative day, the legislature prints what's called a daily file. And in that daily file, it tells you all the bills that are scheduled to come up during the day, the week, or whatever. A lot of times they get really creative. Like you'll see it a lot with the Indian compacts. So, the casinos trying to put different rules into place onto, how many slots they're allowed to have, or what type of cut the special distribution fund is going to get. So you'll have a lot of these gut and amends towards the end of session, and it's like really quick, and it's without reference to file, which means you won't find this in the file notice, but we're going to take up this bill that deals with this. And it's like a bait and switch, if you will.
Kind of like what we're trying to do with HR 40. Okay, got it.
Well, HR 40 deals with reparations. What you're trying to do with the HR 40 is make them put something of substance in the bill that already exists. So that wouldn't be without reference to file. You're just trying to amend a very bad bill.
Got it.
And they do that all the time. They can, if that's the will of the person. That's why you have to get to the author of the bill to make them, or have somebody go in and amend her out and put themselves on the bill. So it's just really weird. And federally, it's a lot, I would say it's a lot different, because they really have respect of person, and, you know, in terms of how long you've been there, how, you know, who all you know, they have respect of person in the federal lines. But here in California, I'm not sure that that's a thing. Not in that way.
This is Lori. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So how does when all of these bills, some can go and be passed into law straight by the Senate, and then some may come up for vote? Is there a difference in between how it diverges and it takes on that path? And then, if it does go to legislation, is it that kind of, how does it, where they couch language, it's like you're voting yes for something and no for something at the same time?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand. So are we talking federally, or are we talking about in the state of California?
In the state of California. So what's the difference between how does a bill either get on the ballot, or they just pass a law and the governor, signs it in its law?
So it gets on the ballot by them doing a petition to gather signatures. So I can't remember the exact number of signatures that it requires to put something on the California ballot. My understanding, in the legislature, they try not to let things go to the ballot. So they may run a bill that deals with the subject matter to try to have that put into place before people have a chance to vote on it. So
can you like, say you do your 4-day notice, and there's like people that show up and they say, well, we're opposed to this, and is there a way to kind of like say we want to have an opportunity to put this on the ballot as opposed to letting it go through?
That's something that the people would do through the Secretary of State. That's really not something that you would ask the legislature for, because they want to do what they want to do, because a lot of times they're trying to get the recognition for it and the camera time for it. So in terms of, we don't want y'all to deal with it, we want y'all to let us put it on the ballot, they don't want you to vote on it. That's why they're trying to put it in a bill form. So if they can just have to convince 119 people as opposed to the population of California, they're going to try to do that. I mean, if I'm being real,
yeah, it makes sense.
They really don't want us to be involved in that process. And a lot of times we're not really involved in the process anyway. We see things after they happen. So I know you guys probably saw the AB 392 stuff last week.
No, tell me about that. Tell us about that.
So that's a bill that's been going through. It's kind of been watered down because the police unions were against them having to put training into perspective and to change the definition of the use of force. So there was a whole thing, and what you'll see is, in order to get bills passed, legislators will strip out certain components so that everybody, it's like a win-win. And a lot of times the win-win, the legislation suffers because it doesn't do exactly what we need it to do. Now, my nonprofit, we actually signed on to support the earlier version of the bill. And then the meat of it, in our opinion, was kind of stripped out. So although the definition was supposed to be changed from to necessary, now is leaving that in the hands of a judge to determine what necessary actually is, instead of just freaking spelling it out in the dang on bill. So a lot of times, because the people who were coming to lobby on the bill were so emotional, they knew they had to do something, but given the appearance of something being done and actually doing something are two different things.
Right.
And I think that they gave the appearance of something being done, but it doesn't do exactly what it was intended to do.
So you're talking about specifically one bill that was in the legislature, AB 392, which was, I guess it was AB 391 at some point last year.
It was last year, and it didn't go anywhere last year.
Right.
Full stop.
So this was a piece of legislation here in California that changed, or was intended to change, the
definition
that prosecutors use when judging police use of force cases. And so what you're talking about, Laureen, is one version of the bill that folks liked in the beginning. And then at a certain point, I don't know if you would call it a gut and amend, or...
No, it was amended. It wasn't gutted, though. It was amended, though.
Okay. So it was changed toward, the end, or at some point in the process, the bill was changed, and many of the people who supported it in the beginning then withdrew their support. Am I correct?
Yeah, some folks did withdraw their support, but it was only because the meat of it and what the bill was supposed to do was kind of stripped out, and that's what had to happen in order for law enforcement.
Because the cat is going to go in.
If you could, guys, just mute your background.
Another one too. Close another one. And that's why when I see, and I know there ain't nobody but you bringing these bags out here like this and just throwing them out there without trying.
It's not Lori. Okay. Sorry, guys. Could you mute your background if you're not talking? I could do it for you, but it'd be cool if you could mute yourself. And so the point I wanted to make here, though, which is, so right now we're talking about specific bill in the legislature, but the point I'm trying to make here, or trying to tease out here, is that sometimes when you are involved in legislation, you're involved in either advocacy or lobbying, sometimes what you start with isn't what you end up with. And so sometimes you start supporting something and then you have to change to not supporting it at a certain point later on, if it gets too bad, if it changes too much what you originally intended.
So you'll have some lobbyists, they'll present support if amended, support unless amended, oppose unless amended, and they'll tell you what they want in it, right? And then I think it's good to clarify, there are a lot of different types of things that go through the legislature. So you have the assembly bills, which is AB whatever, so AB 392, Senate bills, SB whatever. Then there are assembly concurrent resolutions. There are joint resolutions. There are constitutional amendments, so ACAs, Assembly Constitutional Amendments, or SCAs, Senate Constitutional Amendments, things to change things within the California Constitution. They require 2/3 vote. A lot of bills that come up, they require a majority vote. So that's in the Assembly, I believe it's 41, so half plus one. In the Senate, I believe it's 21. And then if there's a bill that has an urgency clause, which means that it will take effect immediately, that requires a 2/3 vote. So 66, I think, in the Assembly, and 30 something in the Senate. I don't work for the Senate, so I really don't have those numbers.
Wait, sorry, Lorraine, can you repeat that last part for me? So if some legislation or some bills require just a majority vote, so 50 plus one.
Right. So half plus one. So right. If it's because it's 80 in the Assembly, it'll be 41.
50, yeah. I have my mind stuck on the federal Congress. So it's a majority plus one, right? So it's right. or it's half plus one for some legislation. For others,
Mhm.
you need 2/3, so you need 66%. Can you
Right.
repeat what?
So the constitutional amendments, you need 2/3
Got
of
it.
the vote.
Got it. So
For any bills that deal with an urgency clause, instead of taking effect when January 1 hits, they take effect immediately. Those require a 2/3 vote.
okay. So if it touches any urgency and needs to be put into effect immediately, it must have a 2/3 vote.
Right.
Also, if it touches the California Constitution at all, it needs a 2/3 vote.
Correct.
Got it.
And then joint resolutions, so AJRs or SJRs, these are resolutions that are used to almost exclusively memorialize Congress. So express approval or disapproval by the California legislature. So those are what AJRs or SJRs are. Concurrent resolutions relate to matters to be treated by both houses. So I don't know if anybody is aware, but last year there was a whole Me Too like push called we said enough, or we had enough, or whatever it was that these white women came up with, and used a blackface to kind of push that thing. There were some concurrent resolutions that came out of that where they're like, okay, we're going to establish an independent body that we actually oversee to take these complaints from women who say they're being sexually harassed on the job, women or men saying they've been sexually harassed on the job. So that's something that goes into effect with concurrent resolutions between both houses. So House and Senate resolutions, I mean, anytime someone retires, anytime someone's moving on, they give these little resolutions or commendations to staff or people in the community for jobs well done. I'm trying to figure out what I need to say and what I can leave out because I don't want to take up too much of people's time today. Let's see. And I think, so if Chris, since you have this up, if you can go to what page is this? On my, I don't know what page this is. 12, if you go to page 12. So just so I can just show something real quick. So every bill is introduced and it kind of looks like this once Chris gets it up on page 12. You probably have to switch that around too.
I went way past 12.
Yeah, just go one more time. Yeah, and then go to page 12 really quick.
Let's see.
And maybe it's 12 on yours and different on mine. I have 12 or 36. Yeah, you're on 9 right now.
Okay, what's the
down.
Okay, I'll just scroll down. Do it.
Yeah, just scroll down.
Perfect. Okay, I think I got it.
And it should be the bill.
Okay. Assembly Bill number 392.
Yep, that one. So if you look at this bill right here, that thin line, it says California legislature, and it tells you it was introduced in that session. So in 2005, 2006 regular session. Every session is 2 years. So we're in the 1920 session right now. The February 11th, that's the introduction date. And as you scroll down, let me see, where is it? So that's just the guts of the bill, right? Everything in it. And I'm trying to find where is it? Anyway, I'm trying to find it, but normally it'll say, let me see. Introduced in this code to, so it might not have all the pages of the bill this way, but a lot of times on the very back page, it'll tell you how much of a vote this bill has to have to get out. And I'm trying to find that. Give me a second. Following questions each bill, because yeah, I don't think they put the whole bill in there, but a lot of times on that very first page, it'll on the bottom, it'll show you if if it requires a majority vote or if it's a 2/3 vote. And I don't see it on this example. Okay, so if you go to page, Chris, 19 on this one. So let's see.
Got it. This is a
Okay.
Senate bill.
So this is a Senate bill, but if you see the amended date up top. So it was introduced on February, but the first time it was amended was April 19th, okay? And as you scroll down, if you look in it's 2 paragraphs on the, maybe 3. At the bottom, it says vote majority, appropriation no. You see that down, where'd it go? Yeah, right there.
Yep,
So
got
it says vote majority. So this is gonna require that half plus 1. So it's gonna go to a fiscal committee, which means it's gonna go to the appropriations committee. I don't know why it says appropriation, no fiscal, yes, but that's just how they keyed it. And it's not a mandated local program. Anytime, and a bill can be amended several times. This one just was amended once. So to speak. And then you know that in the Senate and the Assembly, they vote by ayes or noes. In the Assembly, they vote by clicking a button. In the Senate, they're a little bit more archaic. They call everybody's name and they repeat what they said, and then they go to the next name. With the Assembly, they push a button and then it lights up on the screen in the Assembly chambers. So they're just a little different in that way. Let's see. So in the committee hearings, I'll just go to the committees real quick because that's where I spend most of my time. We can't do any official business until we have a quorum, just like the Assembly floor. If they don't have a quorum, they can't carry on with business. A quorum is half plus 1 as well.
So hold on, Lorraine, give me just 1 second real quickly. Let's define what a quorum is. That's something we're actually going to be dealing with as a group of ADOS here in California as we work toward putting some more organizational infrastructure around what we're doing. But let's define quorum, right? I'm going to give a very not technical definition, and then you can improve it. So it's just the number of people that are required to do any official business or act in the name of a group or some sort of deliberative assembly. So, for example,
it's the minimum number.
Right. It's the minimum number of people that you need to be present before any activity can happen, officially in the name of the group.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so, got it right. Good.
Again, it's that 41 number in the Assembly. It's like that 21 number in the Senate. So there has to be at least that amount of people on the floor before they can start to conduct business. We can't vote on anything. Nothing can get out of committee unless we have established a quorum. And once we establish a quorum, what you will see if you're ever in the building is once the quorum is established, people start disappearing. Because they know that the official business can't begin until you have a quorum. So they'll check in for the quorum, and then they'll leave. Because a lot of times members are put on several different committees because that's where money comes from. You pad their budget accounts by how many committees they sit on. So a lot of the committees meet on the same day at the same time in different parts of the building. So people are always constantly coming in and out. So they'll check in for quorum and then they'll leave. And then no bills can get out unless the minimum amount of people has voted on it. And then what you will always also see is that a lot of the committees are top heavy with Democrats because Democrats are the majority in the Capitol. Last year, I think I had something like 16 Democrats and 9 Republicans on my committee last year. This year, thank goodness, it's a lot less. I have 3 Republicans and like 7 or 8 Democrats. So,
Lorraine, what committee are you working on?
I'm currently on privacy and consumer protection.
Okay, that sounds familiar. An assembly member with a name starting with Uffy and ending with Ix.
Yes, Buffy.
Sounds like
Buffy
she
Witch is
sits
on
on
my
something.
committee.
Yeah.
Yes, she is. I have a bunch of these progressive yet Republican leaning white women on my committee, all white women. A lot of so Bauer, Cahan, Smith, and Wicks are new, and I'm relatively new to this particular committee as well. But it's very interesting to see how they make moves. And there's another one, Jackie Irwin, and it's like, you know, watching a bunch of Mean Girls. It's really funny. So
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know you said you want to go talk more about committee stuff.
no, I was just saying that the committee, they have the same type of required people, so 1+1 to get something out of committee. But it's really hard to do when you have several members on several committees that happen at the same time during the day. And, you know, you spend a lot of time waiting for people to come back and add on or lift the call. So if they don't have enough votes to get something out of committee, we have to place that measure on call, which basically means that we can't move on or close out the hearing without that bill being taken up and the required votes gotten. And if they close the vote, then that bill dies if it doesn't have enough votes to get through. So, and a lot of times you'll see most of these folks know how they're going to vote ahead of time. A lot of the authors of the bills come in before the committee knows how these people are going to vote ahead of time, and they're just trying to, you know, kind of push their measure through by promising to work on it at the next stage. So the way that things happen, like we get to, as the public, a lot of times we see things after things have been done. We don't know how they got done. We don't know the process in which they, you know, they implemented to get things done. We just see the finished product. But for me, as one of the only Black committee secretaries in the legislature, I was the youngest at one point 14 years ago. I don't know if I'm the youngest anymore, but I know that there are 2 of us now. I think there are 2. And I'm the youngest of the 2 of us. And I'm one of the only ones with a college degree, which I found fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see. What else do I need to tell you all?
Can I ask one question here?
You can ask as many questions as you want.
Okay, cool. Thanks, because I got a bunch of questions.
Okay.
So from my experience in advocating to people in the California legislature, there is sometimes let me just ask it straight up. What is how much influence do regular old people who are not, you know, organized in some legal form and some or representing some, you know, official special interest, how much input and influence have you seen in your experience us folks have over legislation directly advocating to legislators?
I don't normally see us in the building. And somebody asked, was there a link to the documents? Are we putting the link somewhere, Chris? Or should I add it to our Facebook chats, or how?
Sorry, you were on. I mean, I was on mute. Yes, this presentation as well as supporting documents will be emailed out to the group. Right now, you should be able to see the screen, but if you can't see the screen, that's totally fine. You will have all this information emailed to you.
So you were asking, was it something that? So
yeah.
What?
How much influence? How much power? You know, or in your experience, you know, has everyday ordinary advocacy had an effect on any legislation that you've seen in your time?
So if I can be honest, the only
Yes.
ordinary advocacy that I have seen since I've been at the Capitol was from the LGBT community. They were going office to office. They were pleading their case. They were forming relationships. I mean, this was back in, let's see, it had to be 05, 06, where they really started heavily descending on the Capitol, and they started going office to office. I've seen people's opinions of LGBTQ community change drastically just by them showing up so often and pleading their case
Okay.
and bringing in statistics and whatever. But when it comes to Black folks, a lot of times I don't see us in the room. And I'm sitting at the dais. I'm probably one of the only Black people in the room most of the times. And I'm like, man, I wish that we would descend upon the Capitol like these other groups do. I wish we could. I mean, same with, say, the families of the folks murdered by police officers.
Right.
When I say they descended, now they did some things that I probably wouldn't have done, but they got their point across. And in getting their point across, they got something out of it. It may not have been what they wanted, but they can still come back for another bite of the apple because they have established the presence that they needed to in the Capitol when it happened. I've seen die-ins happening. I've seen people laying out on the second floor right in front of where the both houses meet. I've seen people going office to office, door to door, talking and trying to change the hearts and minds of people. And really what happens, or how you push legislation or policy, is you develop relationships. When people know you, they are more likely to want to help you if you need help. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us to start building relationships with these folks. We can't go in adversarial. We can't go in, not knowing our stuff. We have to be well read, well researched, and we have to go in there with a mind to, okay, I may not like the way you do things, but I'm realizing that I can't get this passed without you because I am not elected. You are. We have elected certain people and we need to hold them accountable, not just when it's election time, but all the time.
That's a fact. Yeah, no, thank you for that. That definitely helps. And what it sounds like to me, and this is Chris talking, what it sounds like to me is that having a physical presence is important. I actually remember a lot of the direct action around what we were just talking about, AB 392, or I think it's called the California Act to Save Lives, the bill that changes police use of force standards. I saw a lot of social media action around folks doing die-ins, going into folks' offices. I actually was a part of some of that stuff. So it sounds like that can have an effect.
Absolutely.
Cool. I actually have another question. Can you talk to me a little bit about the importance of staffers and staff? Because a lot of times when I went up there and talked to folks, I've rarely ever talked directly to a legislator, right? And normally it's somebody on their staff or somebody else on their staff. So, can you talk to me a little bit about how important are these staffers really?
Well, that's a mixed question for me because I don't like talking to staffers, but that's just me because I'm a staffer.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if I have an issue, I'm not talking to a staffer. I'm not. But staff are very, very important because they have the ear of the member, right? They are the one that the member entrusts the ability to speak on their behalf, to represent on their behalf, and the one that they trust to bring back the concerns of the community. So it's important to talk to the staff. If I have to talk to a staff, I want to talk to the chief of staff. I don't really want to talk to an intern. I don't want to talk to a fellow. I want to talk to somebody who has the ability to influence the member into the direction that I want that member to go. But a lot of times you'll see that with Black groups, they'll give you the fellow, they'll give you the intern, they'll give you somebody who's wet behind the ears and just started their political career, and they can't help you.
So how do you go from, and I'm just because, and this, by full disclosure, I've been doing a bunch of, I call it like street level, concrete, independent type advocacy directly to a lot of these legislators. How do you go from talk with a low level fellow staffer, maybe like a field, operative person, to actually getting to the chief of staff or even to the legislator? What's that process like?
If I'm honest, I don't know what the process is like. I've been in the legislature for almost 15 years now.
Got it.
So I'm kind of on, I'm kind of like on the inside. So I don't really go the typical route. So I don't know what that route is. But what I will say is a simple request to meet with the member of the chief of staff should suffice. You know, I appreciate the offer to meet with a fellow or whatever. They don't know nothing because they just got there and they're only there for 9 months. I don't want to talk to somebody who can't help me. I want to talk to the person who's responsible to help me. You can always send the chief of staff an email requesting a meeting, and most of the time they should want to talk to you to figure out what it is and how they can help. But again, it kind of depends on the temperament of the individual that they meet and how they come across. First impressions are everything. If I meet with you or I see you out in public and you stop me and you're going off on me, 9 times out of 10, I'm not taking that meeting. I'm gonna give you to the fellow. If you come to me with certain data points or whatever, and you say, hey, I really like to, you know, sit down with the chief and maybe even the member and talk about my concerns, that to me should suffice. Just know a lot of times the members are in Sacramento from Monday to Thursday. They return to their district offices on Friday. So Friday if you're, you know, in their district area, they should be there. Monday through Thursday, they're here in Sacramento. I mean, a lot of times they're walking around. They're just, you know, all willy-nilly. You could catch them at the food spots. It's about developing relationships and cultivating those relationships.
Thank you for that. Actually, and I actually want to ask you a question about legislative calendar in a second. I know we have about 15 minutes or so left. So if anyone has any questions, you can either put it in the chat or feel free to jump in. But before I ask about the calendar and the schedule of the California legislature, I actually want to thank you for that last answer because, you know, I actually go, you know, I'm actually here in Sacramento. I actually have an advantage, right? Because I can actually walk right in to the, you know, Capitol. I'm really close. So, but I actually had the experience last week of seeing some of the people who represent us locally here in Sacramento. You know, I actually had the pleasure or the experience of seeing them like when I was like at the gym, right? Yep. You know, yep. and a part of me wanted to go over and say, hey,
you should have
blah 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 blah, you know, right? But then I was like, is this appropriate right now? Like, I got weights in my hand, they on the treadmill, you know, should I just, you know, should I make any type of overture at all? So it sounds like you're saying, you know, maybe you don't engage them in, you know, advocacy right there while they're on the treadmill, but you do go and make your presence known. Say, hey, what's up? I'm Chris. You know, this is how you should know me. Hi, bye, basically.
Well, I think that it's important that we start to perfect our 30-second spiels, right? I don't know if anybody, I don't know, Chris, if you've ever been with me out in this political arena, but I'm like so direct. People can't help but to stop and be like, what the heck is she talking about?
Yes, I've had the pleasure, yes.
I think it's important that we perfect our 30-second pitch. So if I'm at a gym, right, and I see the person, I'm probably going to wait till they get off the treadmill and they're trying to cool down. I'm like, oh, hey, it's assembly member, it's Senator so-and-so. Oh, hi, my name is so-and-so. It's so great to see you out. See, sometimes I forget that you are regular people like us. That is so cool. Anyway, I would like to take the opportunity to talk to you. I would like to set up an opportunity to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. You know, I'll reach out to your staff, but, you know, I'm just making it known. I'd like to talk to the member and kind of get your thoughts on whatever I'm talking about at the time. So it's kind of like, you know, acknowledging them, telling them that you see them, but yet I want you to see me and I want you to address my concerns, because I don't like people just coming around to talk to me during voting time. I want you to talk to me when there's nothing that you want from me and there's something that I want from you. So it's about perfecting that 30-second speech. You know, don't go in, you know, emotional, just kind of matter of fact, you know, lighthearted. But when you do get an opportunity to get in front of them, then you go all business. Like, this is what I want, this is what I see, and this is the problem. What can you do to help me?
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you for that. And then the only other question I had was about legislative calendar. So you talked about that to begin with. I think you did send me some of this info. Okay, I actually have it up right now on the screen. So I've got the 2019 tentative legislative calendar up, and then I think there was another one that you sent me too. So one has color and one has.
They're probably the same because they're both done with the Secretary of Senate and the Chief Clerk's office. Sometimes they differ in maybe the week of, say, when they start vacation. They've been trying to fix that. I don't know if they have, because again, I only work for the Assembly side. But there was 1 year where the vacations or the what do you call it? When they go on different, like the spring recesses or whatever, they were done on different weeks, which caused a problem for the staff in both houses, because there are certain things that we have to do to prepare for when they come off a break. And if we're holding hearings on their bills and they're not in town, that's problematic, right? So they have done they have tried to be more aware of each other's calendar and trying to consolidate them and put them together. So as you can see, statutes take effect January 1st. And then if you see on the last week, so this is from 2019, the last week to submit bill requests. So that's January 25th. So the last week to submit bill requests means that any ideas that the public has submitted or that the lobbyists have submitted, any ideas that need to get to Legislative Council need to be in by that day. So that means that after recess, so they recess in September, they don't come back till January. But the staff is still at the Capitol, and you can go in with your bill ideas, you can email bill ideas, and they'll take it up with their member when they have a chance. So it's important that January 25th date is very, very important. If you have an idea of how they can fix something in your immediate area, or there's an issue, a broad issue that you want them to address in the state of California, you have to have those ideas into them. I would say probably a week prior, because they have to get them written up through Leg Council. And then if you see in the next month, February 27th, that's the last day that members have to actually introduce the bills. So
let me ask you real quick here, Lorraine. So last day to submit any bill requests to the Office of Legislative Counsel is January 25th. So that's for members.
The ideas to be turned into bills. The Legislative Council is a office of lawyers, basically. Okay. So they're researching if they're overlapping in code, if it's legally feasible, and what it would take to make it legally feasible. That's what Legislative Council is going to do. And so you have to get those ideas into them so they can start working on it. Now, sometimes they are slow, sometimes they forget, sometimes things get lost. So you have to kind of stay on them. And then as the member or the author, I have until February 22nd to introduce those bills, which means take that bill down to the Assembly or Senate desk and have it stamped officially to become a bill.
Now, let me ask you real quick, Hillary, who is doing the submitting of the bill request to the Office of Legislative Counsel? Who is doing the staff? Got it. So in between, in the time leading up to January 25th, let's say, those of us here who are outside of the Capitol, we would have needed to done all of our work, made all the relationships, doing all of the persuasion, right? If we're actually talking about having some legislation introduced, right? We would have had to do all that work prior to probably well prior to January 25th, because that's the deadline for the staff to submit any bill requests to
Leg Council.
Right.
Yep.
Got it. Got it.
I mean, you can start building relationships right now.
Yeah, right.
You can start, just dropping by, talking to them about your issue. I mean, the biggest misconception is that you'll talk one time and that'll be that. No, you have to be consistent on your message. You have to ask if the member is going to carry the legislation, if the member has even heard of the legislation, if the member wants more information. What can you do to get them to carry this idea? I mean, it has to be a consistent checking in on whether or not it's going to be accepted.
Got it. Got it. And then you also said that February 22nd is an important day because it's the last day for any bills to be introduced by legislators themselves.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So
It.
those bills have to go, I mean, it has to go through a process. So once they're introduced at the assembly desk, then those bills can then go to the rules committee, like I was talking about, and then rules can start trying to figure out, okay, what subject matter is this in? Who needs to vet this bill first? Is there a second that needs to go, a second pair of eyes or whatever to vet, a second committee to vet? Okay, it deals with money, it doesn't deal with money, it's going straight to here. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different things that go into effect.
Okay.
Before business can be handled.
So there is one question in the chat, and I did want to say also, just reiterate that the first committee that any bill goes to is rules, no matter what. Okay, got it. The question is typically how much money is required to get all those folks involved to push a bill through the system. I'm sure the big donors / interests get priority. How are bills prioritized? Right? That's a good question.
So, I mean, everyone has lobbyists, right? Everyone has unions. I mean, unions have people can affect your chances of being reelected. So I'm probably going to prioritize folks who have a lot of people that could really hurt my chances of being elected. Those are usually unions. Those are, yeah, pretty much unions. Unions run that place, if I'm honest. You have some lobbyists that, represent high profile clients like City of Artesia, City of Industry, like law enforcement. Like you just have folks who are just over there doing the consistent bidding. And because they have the means to say, take a member to lunch, take a member to dinner, they have these tools in which they can that helps them foster those relationships. So I could go grab coffee, I can go, I can do a special reception for you to get in front of you. I can donate to your campaign fund. So the people who have money do affect the decisions that legislators make. But a lot of the time, those legislators those lobbyists don't live in the area in which the legislator was elected from. So you would have to do a lot of mobilizing on the ground for them to probably take you seriously. So if that makes sense, does that make sense, what I'm trying to express?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
You just raised a good point here too, though, that having a local, so let me just ask you, as do members care more about concerns that they hear directly from people in their district as opposed to people in other parts of California? I would assume yes.
Yes, of course, because they're responsible for their district. They're supposed to care about, but it depends on who's bringing the issue forward, right? So a lot of times the only people who bring issues forward are teachers. So CTA gets heavily involved. They're law enforcement who, still want the autonomy to be able to do what they want to do. It's not normally people who are like you and me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to get better at being those people.
Yeah. Yeah. This is actually part of why we're here today. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we got well, let me ask, is there any other information that you would like to present before we open up for final questions?
So I just want to bring your attention to one thing. If you scroll down on the calendar, so it says August 30th is the last day for fiscal committees to meet, right, and report bills. That's the appropriations committees. So any committees that deal with money, that's supposed to be the last day that they can meet, right? That doesn't mean that that's the last day that they can meet. That means that if in fact there are fiscal committees who need to meet after the August 30th date, they're just going to request a rule waiver. So you see the joint rule 61A12, they will just request a rule waiver to get that that sentence or to meet after that date. So that date is not the final date, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then when you see down on the calendar, it says September 3rd through 13th floor session only. That's not what that means. What that means is that's supposed to be floor session only. But if you see right here, it says committee bills referred pursuant to Assembly Resolution 77.2.
Wait, where are you? Are you still in
Still
September?
September 3rd through the 13th.
Got it. Yep.
The second sentence,
Yep.
and conference committees. So that means that any bills that are 77.2, so say the Senate sent something over that they have amended, an assembly bill that they have amended. So they're going to send it back to the assembly so that they can hear the revision that they made. And then there's a process where we're supposed to concur or agree with the Senate amendments. So we have hearings off the floor all the time.
Really?
We have, oh yeah, they can call us at a minute. We need you to hear this bill. And so we're there anywhere from 5 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, depending on who's doing what. So that does not mean what it says it means. It's just, it's a suggestion.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Anything
thank you
that
for
you
that.
see in those parentheses or those, whatever that is, quotes or however, anything that you see in those, that means you just have to get a rule waiver to get around that.
Okay. Cool. Thank you for that.